tax app, I was like, I'll sign up for that right away. I don't know how long it's going to take for something like that to find its way to Germany, but one of the most complicated tax systems in the world. But that's a different topic. We're going to get into our first panel discussion now. And we're going to learn what we can learn from the success stories of some of the most well-known platforms out there. And this is going to be moderated by an expert with the 15 years of expertise in payment and fintech, e-commerce and loyalty. He is a true expert when it comes to product and business development issues. A man with solutions. So please welcome for this panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President, Product Management, Payment and Risk at Wirecard. Here's Kilian Thalhammer. Welcome, Kilian.
Thanks for the intro.
And you brought some guests along who you'll be introducing now, right?
Yeah.
All right.
That's obviously. So take a seat. So thanks, Chris. Thanks for the intro. Happy to host the first panel of the day. A little bit talking about platforms in the 21st century. What are the success factors? What are the learnings? Maybe also a little bit about mistakes. Happy to have a very prominent panel here with really experts in the different areas of platform. And before we jump into the content questions, really starting with a short intro. Maybe starting over there, Sebastian.
I'm
synthesis. Yeah, sorry.
So I'm Sebastian Hild from Microsoft. I'm a specialist for digital platforms and ecosystems.
Yeah, my name is Martin Guther from SAP, and I run the Center of Excellence for the Business Technology Platform in Middle and Eastern Europe.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Markus Eichinger. I'm the EVP Group Strategy for Wirecard, and I always tend to say, like, the job of my team and me comes back to a pretty simple question, and that is, if we assume that with the business that we have today, we don't generate any more money in 10 years over time, what would we do now? And that is the question that needs to be answered. And I found it very impressive also to see in the talk of Facebook that it's sometimes the most innovative firms that are not frightened at all to really totally pivot. Because sometimes you would always tend to, like, old firms have to change, but I think that's exactly not the case if you're in a world that is changing so quickly like ours today.
Yeah, totally. Sometimes it's necessary, if you're already successful, starting with a change, not being the last one, maybe being before changes change you. So maybe let's start with Microsoft as one of the leading tech players in the market. Which key trends do you see at the moment driving the platform economy, driving platforms itself, and how do you see them in the next 3-4 years, or maybe longer?
So certainly, I believe personally that platforms are not going away. There will be more and more platforms coming. The important thing is, as we heard a couple times today, it's a relentless focus on the user experience and making it frictionless and evolve over the user experience over time. One thing we certainly see, as right now everyone is very fixated on the mobile phone as the machine, as the device for connecting to the platforms. I think that will stay, but it will also open to different devices and modes of input. Think of voice, think of intelligent speakers, think of intelligent hearing aids. And that's an important factor because platforms should be, of course, inclusive and include everyone. And offer seamlessly experience for everyone. So just think of a situation when you have a ski accident and your arm is in a sling and you can't move it. How can you navigate a website? You can't trust your keyboard anymore. Maybe you can use your phone, but different forms of input would be great. And I think we can learn a lot from the gaming industry. So if you look at gaming and very successful games, they travel across different devices from mobile to Xbox. You can use them on the go. You can use them at home on a Windows PC, maybe on a PlayStation. And I think this could be something where platforms evolve into.
And maybe also have the potential to getting more added value to make it as seamless as possible. That means,
of course,
seamless is one of the key drivers of platform and the related business models behind that. Markus, which mega trends do you see combined with platforms, and on the other side, why should we really care about these megatrends? Not just watch, maybe also caring from a consumer point of view, and maybe also from a company point of view.
Yeah, I think for us, the trend to platform is really a mega trend. I mean, we also should question ourselves, why is it now that platforms really emerge in such a broad range of industries? And I think it really comes down to not only the mobile phone, but digitization as in general, because what a platform basically does is connecting two sides, offer and demand. And with a growing level of digitization, it becomes easier to connect these two sides. And I think that's exactly why we are seeing so many platforms disrupting nearly every industry where it would not have been thinkable 20 years ago, like the whole mobility space with Uber, even advertising with Google, social networks with Facebooks. So that's all a trend that came up in the last 10 to 20 years, and that's directly connected to digitization. Well, I think why are platforms important for us? So I think it's a given that this is a trend, but why is it important? I think it's because platforms really put the platform owner into a certain level of control, not only in form of the data that flows through the platform, but also in terms of the broad range of customers that you attract with your platform. So the overall business just becomes more stable, or you could even say more relevant.
So interesting analogies are really to linking platform more and more one-to-one to connecting offer and demand, because connecting offer demand is something which was there forever. So each marketplace is more or less connecting offer on demand, independently which technology is used. So I think that's a quite good analogy. That means platforms are not new. Maybe the wording is new and the context is new, but the platform itself not. So that's quite interesting. So Martin, as SAP is already quite long into the technology space already, which learnings do you see while dealing with all these different type of platforms? When you look a little bit back, last 5-10 years, what are the key points we're seeing from an SAP point of view? So if I do it again, I would change that.
It's a very good question, of course. The first one being about, why would you do a platform? What's the value add for your customer? And this is a question, of course, for SAP, but this is a question also to a lot of our customers. Do you want to build a platform? Is it really a platform that you need in order to, merchant your services to your end consumers or customers? Or do you want to join a platform? And what is the value add that you get from this platform? So it's a little bit a question about make and buy. Do you want to make a platform? Do you really want to do that? Or do you want to join one, right? And does it make sense from a strategic perspective? So that's the first thought, a little bit this make versus buy discussion. The second question is around, of course, we see a globally connected economy, and it's all about openness. Dr. Braun mentioned that at the beginning, of course, very rightly so. It's all about openness. Yeah? You want to have it frictionless. You want it to be interconnected with all the things that are going on. Yeah? That's the one element. The other element is, of course, the growing concerns around security, around privacy, around how much effort or how much influence do maybe, certain governments have into what is going on. Yeah. So there is a little bit, this, divide between you need to be open, you want to exchange data, you want to be connected, yeah, but you want to be also sure from your very personal perspective that your privacy is protected. Maybe even so, if you want to step it up a little bit, that your ethical beliefs are also protected in the way a platform that you trust your data is handling your data.
So, and just adding one point on that, you just mentioned the different aspects. So how do you see, or which different roles could a player like SAP take in these contexts? And how do you decide which role do you want to play in that game?
Yeah. So, of course, we're, focusing a lot on business value. Yeah. And there is this connection between what is the next, thing in business value. Of course, SAP is very known, for process efficiency, for streamlining process and things of that nature. Yeah. The question is, what we see now is, of course, there is much more data out there. yeah, how to get value out of that data. Yeah, again, Mr. Brown talked about, 99% of whatever the data is not used. Yeah? So how can we make sure that more of that data is used, of course, in a business context? Yeah, and how can we make sure it is used at the same time in a secure, private manner? On the other side, also cost efficient, right? Because again, privacy and security comes at a cost. And the question is, how can we, strike the right balance between what is secure and what is affordable and acceptable to consumers?
Totally. So picking up your point, Markus, and now heading over that a little bit in the payment fintech industry space, how do you see, or what is the approach of a company like Wirecard in that game, also taking different roles in the platform economy? On the one side, being a platform, on the other side, supporting other platforms, and how to bring these maybe contradictional views under one umbrella?
I think it's not necessarily contradictory. I think both models are equally valid. If you look at the fintech scene, you have companies that are platforms, you have companies that are supporting platforms. I think the platform architecture is a stronger proposition, however, because there are various benefits if you operate your business as a platform one. First of all, you control, as I already said, you control data flows to a larger extent than if you just work with platforms. Second, you automatically create higher barriers of entry. If you have a strong position in a platform, it's just virtually impossible for another player to enter the same market. And third, it's something I already mentioned as well, is you have a more stable business because you always have the demand and the offer side. So that just gives you more stability. So I think also in our industry, beside fintech, in the banking industry, the platform economy is a big word, and many banks would say, okay, we're developing into a platform. But becoming a platform is easier said than being done. And most obviously banks, they suffer from huge loads of legacy technology, which just makes it impossible to create the platform architecture. And that's, I think, where fintechs have a particular benefit. And that's also why companies like N26 are so successful, because they can just develop from scratch with a platform approach. And I think that's a true game changer, because it's very difficult to move from a non-platform business to a platform business.
Totally. So maybe completing the round, Martin, how you see the topics, and maybe adding one question. Do you see Microsoft itself as a platform? And if yes, in which context?
So first of all, Microsoft evolved from a product company to a true platform company. And you see that in specific examples. Xbox, I mentioned that once, and Office 365, which is a great service, which offers more capabilities than a platform which really connects users and helps them to do better work, which breaks down silos. So that is certainly the way Microsoft is delivering its product. It has a dramatic effect on how we are working internally to ship those products, because you can't deliver those products in silos anymore. So you need to break down those silos to deliver a great experience. On the other side, Microsoft develops technology, so everything from cloud services, databases, to security modules for IoT, for example, to give other companies the opportunity to build great experience, either in digital products or platforms, etc. So we are in both fields and both areas, but of course, much stronger. We are in a field where we are enabling others to create their own digital experience. Yeah. When we are talking about security, trust is very important, and that's part of the power formula. Because if there's no trust in platform, in the technology, that it's secure, that the data is being used in an ethical way, people or consumers of the platform will go away and will disabandon the platform. And that's one very important aspect for Microsoft, to deliver technology which others can take and put into place to make the experience secure.
Yeah. And I think it's a quite nice analogy is that you said, okay, before you as a company or an organization being able to be a platform, you have to break up your organization itself. That means before the organization itself is not a platform, it is quite hard to deliver a platform to the market. And adding on that point, We talked a lot about now success and platform are good things and really driving us. But what do you see are the key ingredients for that? What do you need? Because it's always good to have some strategic slides and say, okay, hey, platform is good, and we earn money out of platforms in the next 10 years, not out of these payment stuff anymore. But what do you see if you don't have these ingredients? It will be quite hard to be a platform. What do you see there?
So one important thing which we heard throughout the day so far is a relentless focus on the customer and the consumer experience, because that is very important. And you constantly need to innovate on these platforms because the expectations and the experience might change. That is one important thing, definitely. The other thing is, which I explained earlier, more devices will be used. A device can be an intelligent jacket, etc. So think of that and build that into your digital experience. That's one of the most important factors. And there won't be probably just one platform. So we are talking a lot with cities about developing digital experiences for the cities. But what does it help if you have a digital platform for the city of Frankfurt and Munich and you're traveling in between and the experience is different and those platforms are not interconnected in the backend? So one very important thing is for anyone who builds a platform to choose smart partnerships to have a better experience for the customer. And that can be with Wirecard, a payment provider, with Microsoft who are offering service. So that is one very strong trend I see coming up.
Okay. So Martin, how do you see it? Is any major topic missing there? Or on the other side, do you see ingredients which should not be part of a platform or really being a major hurdle on that?
Well, the question is, what is it you want to deliver to your customer or to your end consumer? Yeah. And the question is, what is it that, you have maybe as a platform offering, or maybe you see from other companies? Yeah. So if we take the example of SAP, you probably heard, we just acquired a company called Qualtrics, yeah, because we believe that when we talk about commerce, the experience is really important. It's not only how fast was a payment, but was the experience good? Is the customer willing to share experience insights? Yeah, so we acquired Qualtrics. We're talking about experience data, and we built the business technology platform in order to integrate that data with all machine learning and AI, whatever is needed in order to integrate it into a business process. Yeah. So that's kind of one element in order to make it really successful. Yeah. The second element is, of course, then where do you want to partner? Yeah. And again, taking the example of SAP, yeah. So we do things that we believe drives value for our customers that we do ourselves by an acquisition or by development of such a business technology platform. The other thing is, where do we see partnerships make sense in terms of platform? Yeah. So for example, we made a decision to have what we call a multi-cloud strategy, because we believe hyperscalers such as Microsoft offer tremendous value to our customers. Fairly spoken, that SAP in this sense, by this scale, in this dynamic, is not able to offer. Yeah. So we make a conscious decision to say, if we look at, for example, infrastructure as a service, it absolutely makes sense to partner with the best available services in the industry, including Microsoft. Maybe if you want to go to China, Alibaba is a better one. Yeah, if you want to go to Russia, there are always specific situations in specific geographies, where it makes sense to partner with maybe somebody else. That's why we said, from our perspective, multi-cloud absolutely makes sense. Yeah, and we can deliver additional value by offering this choice to our customers. So it's always a little bit a conscious decision in terms of what do you really want to do yourself and what you're actually good at. And where does it make sense to be really open in the industry or in the ecosystem to say, let's be fair, there are other parties that do a great job. Why not work with them?
Yeah. And maybe Markus, adding one question. We heard now from both sides that partnerships are important on that topic. I would on the one side agree, but on the other side, partnerships is always about ownership. Who owns what? I think it's easy about when we talk about technology. Partner A can provide technology A, partner B can provide technology B. But what about the customer? Who owns the customer at the end? And we always discuss these big platforms. We heard it from Facebook, we heard it from Google, taking away customers from other players. So do you have any idea how to solve this topic in the context of partnership, especially on that level?
I think that's exactly why platforms exist, because they want to own the customer and they want to own the suppliers. And that makes up the power of true platforms. I mean, claiming a platform is easy. I mean, sometimes people would just claim we do platform business, but they essentially mean we're just delivering a good value proposition. A true platform model always consists of owning the critical pieces of information and the critical access to the customer. And I think with that respect, and that's also our approach to it, we look at the customers we serve. And the customers we serve, they are competing against maybe Amazon, they're competing against other platforms. And I think that's exactly the challenge where we want to provide value, because I think essentially everybody has the same amount of data available. And I think it's more the question how to make this available to our customers in order to really keep up with those developments.
Totally. Martin, talk a little bit about how maybe the rules of making business will change, not maybe already changed in the platform economy, and what is the impact on these new rules for a player like SAP? Do you see a differentiation or a change now in the USPs you need to communicate towards the market to be ready, being part of the platform economy? What is now important and what is maybe not so important anymore when you look in the back and said, okay, this USP is 5 years ago, nobody cares anymore?
So, of course, I like to talk about the clock speed of an industry. And of course, in the software industry, the clock speed always has been quite high. We just need to develop software. So it's not like we need to, build a factory and build up machines or whatever it is. But what we see is the clock speed for all industries has significantly increased. If we look at product cycles of, for example, an automotive industry, this used to be 10 years. These days are gone. So the question is, quite simply put, you need to be a lot more faster. You need to be a lot more agile. And the question is, of course, especially when physical assets come into play, how do you do that? How can you become really quick and fast? And we already talked a little bit about banking industry, digital startups like N24 without all the legacy technology that they have in play. The question is, of course, one is for the digital startups, how do they evolve? But the question is also for the traditional industry, how can they evolve? How can they become agile? How can they drive innovation? And quite frankly speaking, at SAP, we have a similar challenge. You have an existing business, you have an existing revenue stream that needs to continue, that provides profitability. And at the same time, you want to step up your game in terms of the innovation. So how do you do that? How do you disrupt your business without disrupting your revenue? So that's a little bit, the challenge that we see going forward. And this is, of course, we firmly believe that, technology and services can provide a lot of value to that. Also the methodology. We often speak about that, a lot of our customers basically need to become software companies. There will be a lot more software in what they do. And it's also the way in terms of, methods like design thinking, like agile methods in general, that need to be more prominent in the way work is structured and work is done.
I think the last point you mentioned is very interesting. How to transform your business into a platform business models, because that always will mean that you have to give up sorts of revenue streams that you are used to, because I find it's way easier to do non-platform based revenues in contrast to do platform based revenues. And usually that means a total transformation of the overall business model. And the even severe problem, I think, is that the platform might be the stronger proposition, but it's not something that generates results in the next quarter period, which then makes it very complex for larger organizations to really transform themselves.
especially if they are, publicly noted. Yeah, if you need have public listings, if you need to deliver quarterly results, you need to be smart about how you do that. Yeah.
So what is very important, you just mentioned it, we're talking about technology and the promise of platforms, but in the end, and you rightly said it, the use of technology and software in all the products will increase. That means a necessity for every company to upskill their people, not only in design thinking and methods, but also in really hands-on and technical programs. So this is something Microsoft, for example, as a software company, does now worldwide for its 100,000 employees. Everyone has to go through technical training to understand how our technology functions better. And we are partnering with our customers and giving out those technical training and technical skilling initiatives for free to help them better adopt to the changing environments. And that's a very important factor, people upskilling people in the whole discussion, which shouldn't be missed.
Yeah. And I think also totally finding the right point of time when to start that. Not to being the first one, but also not the last one. I think both are the most, not the best positions in that game. Somewhere in the middle, and find, okay, now I have to jump on the train, and hopefully the train is not too fast and also not too slow, that I can still jump up there. And that's maybe tricky. That's maybe also the part of the game where a lot of mistakes, investments are taken, because sometimes I get the feeling that in some companies, these platform topics must be checked and said, okay, yes, we are doing some with the platform, checkbox, move on. But I don't think that it works like this. So because it's not a checkbox.
I think most companies are severely underestimating the investment and effort it takes to create platform businesses.
To platform and also, to technology. I'm sometimes surprised, if you have, senior executives talk about strategy. And, of course, we're coming from a technology perspective as well, but, not understanding technology. I believe, you cannot afford, being a senior executive in whatever company it is, to not understand, things like the impact of machine learning and artificial intelligence. I think that is a mandate if you want to be an executive, that you understand and can, judge the impact that these trends will have on your business. And I'm very surprised. I do a lot of travel. You travel to China, you travel to Russia, you travel to the US, wherever you go, right? And you see this difference between, groups of executives that do understand really what's going on, and some of them really don't understand. And it has nothing to do with the, profitability or, where the company is currently positioned. It's the question where they will be in 5 or 10 years, because these are the teams that will make those decisions on how the company is moving forward.
Totally. And coming back to the discussion, we had, I think, 2 or 3 questions before about these prerequisites. And you're mentioning, for example, AI, machine learning and topics. But Sebastian, one point I want to stress a little bit more, how do you see the role of data itself in the context? Because maybe it's totally obvious to everybody of us, okay, it's clear. But maybe it's a topic where we did not touch so far. We talked about technology, about trends, but the data itself, having data, getting data, how do you see that in that game?
It's usually important because that's what platform actually drives. So every interaction on a platform leaves a trail of data. We also heard that most of the data is not really being used, and I personally believe this is where modern technology, we heard some things, machine learning, AI, can really come into a big play, making use for that data. So now the question is, for what do you really use it? And the only answer is to create a better experience for the customer, which is more frictionless, which is tailored to the individual person. So something really in retail, which is thriving now, having an individual experience, knowing what a customer wants and providing a better service. And for that, data is usually important. So however, everyone knows data has to be secured. You have to make your users aware for what do you take their data in, how you're using it, how you're processing. So again, trust there and transparency to the users of the platform, that's usually important. And when it comes to machine learning and AI, working after ethical standards and developing your software after ethical standards in the industry and the company, that's also a big primer.
Totally, and I think it's not only about how to use the data, also to have a plan how to get the data. So before using it, you need it. So you need to have a scalable plan how to generate this amount of data to make the right context to get a usage. We talked a lot about a little bit the platform economy from an inside-out view, from our point of view, but a little bit coming back. We heard it on the Facebook keynote before, from the end consumer point of view. So how do you see, when do an end consumer realizes, hey, there's a platform in the game?
So I think consumers now are very mature compared to 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. So when you look at a modern mobile phone, those things doesn't work without a number of platforms in the background. So I would say everyone is mature enough to understand there's some certain part of technology. Is that always a platform or not in a typical technology sense? Maybe, maybe not. But everyone knows how to drive a car without really understanding how it's technically functioning. So the question is it necessary to know that a digital service being served through a platform or not? I think this doesn't necessarily make sense from a consumer perspective to always know. It's more about, is the data being used well? And is that a good experience for me? And does it provide really value for me or my business? I think these are the most important factors, because everything else or in the future will be served through something like a platform.
I think it would be even not even something which would be a good signal if you, as a consumer, recognize, okay, now I'm using a service based on a platform. I think that's just a bad sign if you see it, because as a consumer, you should just experience a good frictionless process. And I think platforms are an enabler to deliver those processes. So you might just see that, okay, works quite well with Uber, and it doesn't work well with other ride-hailing apps. And that could just be because the platform is executed in a better way.
It's a quite good analogy, because we have a similar discussion in the payment space. So the end consumer did not care about how it works from the inside out. It's the best case if the end consumer maybe more or less did not realize that he just paid as part of his customer journey. So that's
I think what is interesting is that the cashless payment industry exists for decades. It has always been designed as a platform from the very beginning, with the card schemes providing, now we would say, a platform for banks in the role of card issuers and acquirers. And the acquirers are serving the merchant side, and the issuers are serving the consumer sides. So nowadays, you would say that's a platform, but it has always worked that way. And I think what's a bit unique also on how we want to make use of that ecosystem is that I think Wirecard is one of the few companies really connecting both areas. So you would say there's sometimes in banks, there's a strong business on acquiring, there's a strong business on issuing, but they're sitting in separate towers. They don't even talk to each other. And I think that's exactly what is changing in our industry, is that those two sides are coming together, because that helps if you are approaching the process, the conversion process from a payment point of view. That helps you to design a more seamless customer experience.
That's exactly what brings me to one of my next questions. So what makes Wirecut itself a platform? You're already mentioning that. So breaking up these different silos in an existing industry, where we're still in the same industry, where we have inside silos, but making the next step out of that. How do you see that our customers, from a Wirecard perspective, or the end consumer, is profiting from that breaking up the silos? Because nobody wants to break up silos just for breaking it up, because it's also a pain.
I always tell an example which I think is quite helpful to understand the value. Imagine you want to buy a TV set, and you go to a store, and then you look at those various TV sets, and there's a bigger one, a larger one, a nicer one, which is a bit more expensive though. So you want to buy it, but you can't afford it. So what you would normally do is to go to this a bit awkward zero financing counters, where you fill out a form and then you get your zero financing. Now just imagine you have a wallet like Boon, which would instantly, in that very moment where you are in the store, offer you a financing specifically for that product you want to buy. So you could just walk to the checkout, pay cashless at the counter. So you have a credit contract, a revolving credit in the background, without anybody noticing it. And what I think is significant is that the business model, also the value proposition, totally changes. The value proposition of an acquirer, PSP, would be, okay, I process a technical payment transaction. Now the value proposition changes to allowing a conversion, a higher conversion. And I think that's exactly the value that we want to provide to our customers, being the merchants, but also for the end consumers. It's great because there's just less friction in the process.
Yeah. Totally. How do you see, Martin, from an SAP perspective? Do you have similar examples, because make it more tangible, where we see these effects?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are 2, 3 maybe elements. Yeah, the first one is, coming back to the earlier point around the data. The question is, we all agree it's a data-driven economy, but do we really manage the data as a strategic asset, if you will? And I take this example, and it's the same with SAP. So no offense to Wirecard, you probably know the value of this chair very well, right? You bought it, you have it in your books, and you do depreciation.
Not even sure, to be honest.
I hope. Well,
maybe it's a service.
If not, we need to have a conversation at the coffee table later on. Yeah? So, but the point is, you know the value of physical assets, of course. Yeah? But if you look at, what is the value of the data that you have acquired? Do you really manage that in a way as a strategic asset? Yeah, that it would actually deserve it. Yeah, and we just, co-wrote a very nice white paper with the University of St. Gallen and did some empirical studies in terms of how do companies actually manage the value of their data. In, long story short, not so much. Yeah, there is a lot of work to be done because we all talk about this, but we don't really do it. Yeah? So the question is, if data is a strategic asset, we need to manage it as such. Yeah? There needs to be responsibilities, governance, securities, budgets, and people in order to do it. Yeah? That's being the first one. Then the next one is, how can we make sure that, based on what your, the example that you gave, is how does that make, does that add value to customers? Yeah, do they, have a better deal at whatever outlet is that they are buying? Yeah, and can we get that data value to our customers? Yeah, that's something we are really into in terms of what we're building our solutions. I talked about the experience management, getting the better offer. And ultimately, what we are all about is providing the better experience. Now, again, it's not only, saying we want to have a better experience. Yeah, we also firmly believe we need to manage that experience. We need to understand that experience. We need to understand how good was it really, and what are the things that we can do in order to improve that experience. Again, talking about technologies, AI and such, yeah. But really, ultimately, it's about having that focused experience, understanding really that experience, and then improving it, ultimately managing it.
Okay. So quite interesting discussion. I think we come now to a last round and leave also the last 2-3 minutes for some questions from the audience. But before we jump over to the Q&A part, Sebastian, I would start. Looking into the audience and the different roles we have there, what advice would you give everybody here, the different players, when they deal with platforms? What should do? What should they take care of? And then let's make the round.
So first of all, the experience of the user of the platform and the change of the experience, and that it's very important to manage that. Secondly, that of course data has value, but that value might deteriorate or shift, or it has a price. So think about that, and where the value you provide really resides, because platform as two-sided. Data has a value for you as a platform provider, but also the actors on the platform. Thirdly is, as I said, everything around security, keeping data safe, making the experience very well. That is something which should be observed and which is very important. Fourthly, the experience travels across devices, so don't just get fixated on a mobile phone, on a report, or on a website. Think of where your service will be consumed by whom and how. Is that at home? Is that on the production line? What is the experience there, and how do you really need to provide that service through whatever means, intelligent speaker, intelligent glasses, and tailor your service accordingly.
So from my perspective, the interesting question also for a lot of customers is, platform and innovation, when to do what, how to scale. And what we see is, sometimes when we talk about innovation, it's that often quoted, fail early, fail often. So I would argue that, at the very early stage of innovation, if you think about something new you want to, deliver to your customers, maybe the platform approach is not the right approach. You're thinking more in an agile proof of concept manner. You want to see if something's working out. You want to try it with a couple of things on a small scale and really see, is that really working? Now, there is something that is called crossing the chasm, right? So you want to make sure, and I like this example very much of the tech spots in Australia. I'd like to have that myself as well, but there is always an inflection point when you say, I have really a great idea. I have this idea of how can I make, tax returns easy, but I need a means to deliver it. I need to cross the chasm. It's not only just a nice idea. I have, develop maybe a couple of machine learning scripts that run a bot, right? But I need a means to scale it, right? So then is the right time to say, okay, now I need to think about scalability. I need to think about, is that something that, I want to have a payment platform like Wirecard. I want to have a social platform like Facebook. I want to have a business technology platform like SAP, whatever it is, right? What is the right point in time in order to think about how do I scale that, right? And how I leverage platform capabilities, either existing or to be built, in order to scale it.
Totally.
Last round.
Yeah, so my final words would be like, I think with all the hype also around platforms, sometimes it is also important to state not every business needs to become a platform. So I think there is absolutely valid to run a business, to run a company, not being a platform. It can serve the employees well. It can lead to great economical success. But if you decide to become a platform, it's a transformatory process. It's not something you can do besides doing your core business. It means completely transforming an enterprise. So I think the mistake that many people make is they don't make that decision, or they want to do both and they were not willing to take risk. So I think both approaches are equally fair, but they don't go together quite well.
Thanks. So last 3 minutes, we are on the exchange day, so open up for questions for the panel.
Exactly. But first, a big round of applause, please, for our guests here on stage, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Kilian, Markus, Martin, and Sebastian. Any questions? Don't be shy. We'll get you the microphone. Now's the chance. Come on now. There we go.
So thanks very much for your interesting thoughts and the discussion. Your discussion, however, was totally focused on a consumer-oriented world. There's a tiny part of the business called B2B. Any thoughts on this and platform in the B2B world?
Yeah, I can answer that. I think that the paradigms of platforms serve well in the B2C and in the B2B business. So a lot of the things we discussed around security, understand the user of your platform, that's the same in B2B as in B2C. So I think everything we talked about really upholds for both worlds. Just the user of the platform is a different one. It's a company or it's a stakeholder in a company versus individual consumer.
Yeah. Now that's one thought. The other thought is, if you think about a value chain, there is always, hopefully, a consumer at the end of the value chain, right? So it's more thinking about that B2B to C. Yeah. And the question is, when you engineer business or you try to reverse engineer it, where do you start your thinking process? What we often find helpful is to say, we start at the beginning, right, or at the end, depending on how you look at it. So you start at the consumer, which is maybe, the customer of your customer, if you talk about a business-to-business platform, right? So you want to think about what is the value chain, what is the end point that you want to get to, what is the best way, the best experience, the most efficient experience that it gets to, and what is it you need to do in a B2B context in order to serve it. So B2B always has a purpose, right? And the purpose is, of course, always thinking about the entire value chain.
I could not agree more, neither could I add anything more.
Other questions?
Good. Then?
Then we'll wrap it up. Once again, thank you, gentlemen. And now it's time, ladies and gentlemen, for a lunch break. The lunch break will take place at the same place you had your breakfast outside. And please be sure to be back at 12.